It is strange how a single moment can pull you back into a life you thought was long gone. For me, it started with a letter slipped under my door at dawn. No return address, just 3 words that froze my blood. I found you. I stared at it for a long time before whispering to myself, "All right, Grace. It is time." I even laughed afterward, one of those thin, shaky laughs older women make when they're pretending not to be afraid. But underneath, the truth was heavy. My name is Grace. And for 28 years, the world believed I was dead. People built stories around me like they were quilting myths. Some said I ran off with a man. Others swore I drowned in that storm back in '79. A few whispered I'd lost my mind. Sometimes I'd hear those rumors and think, well, at least they're creative. Little jokes like that kept me standing, but none of them came close to the truth, because I didn't run from life. I ran for my life. For almost 3 decades, I lived behind names that weren't mine. Linda, Mary, Claire. I wore them like borrowed coats. Useful, but never warm. I worked in places where no one asked questions. Grocery stores, laundromats, a sewing factory that always smelled like old cotton and burnt thread. I learned how to disappear without leaving the room. Sometimes people would ask, "Where are you from?" I'd smile and say, "Oh, here and there," and quickly steer the conversation elsewhere, because the real answer was too dangerous. I avoided anything connected to Havenwood. Churches, old hymns, even the sound of choir bells made my heart race. Havenwood wasn't just a town. It was a cage painted to look like home. For years, I wouldn't let myself remember it, wouldn't let myself speak it, wouldn't let myself breathe its name. But age has a way of cornering you. One day you wake up with shaking hands, aching bones, and the sudden realization that you can't keep carrying a secret heavier than your own body. You can't leave this world with the truth buried under your tongue. And then the letter arrived. That name on the envelope, the name I hadn't heard since '79, shook something loose inside me. So here I am, 70 years old, tired but standing, and ready to walk back into the darkness I escaped. If you stay with me, I will tell you everything. Not the rumors, not the legends, the truth. And before this ends, you'll understand why someone in Havenwood never stopped looking for me. This is where my real story begins. I was never the loud one in any room. That is the truth. Even as a child, I was the girl who sat by the window while everyone else ran around shouting. I liked quiet. I liked watching the world instead of trying to keep up with it. My mother used to sigh and say, "Grace, you feel too much for someone so young." Maybe she was right. By the time I turned 16, it was obvious I did not fit the life everyone expected from me. Other girls talked about dresses, dances, husbands. One classmate poked my arm and said, "Grace, you need to come back to Earth." I smiled. But the truth was, Earth felt too loud. I wanted peace. I wanted purpose. I wanted a place where silence wasn't a flaw. So, one morning, I packed a small suitcase. Just a few clothes and a half-broken rosary, the kind you keep because it's the only thing that ever stayed in your hands. My mother held my fingers at the door. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I think this is where I belong." She nodded, even though her eyes shone like she was losing something she couldn't name. When I walked through the gates of Street Mary of Peace, something in me settled. The gravel under my shoes, the quiet halls, the faraway singing, and the soft click of keys somewhere down the corridor. It all felt strangely familiar, like stepping into a memory I didn't know I had. The early years were calm, gentle, even. I woke before sunrise, helped in the garden, learned prayers, learned discipline, learned how to live without the noise of the outside world. And I liked it, truly. It felt safe, predictable. Except for the rules I wasn't allowed to ask questions about, the sisters became a new kind of family. Joy, with her too loud laugh. Martha, with her warm, steady voice. Eleanor, always reading, always humming. And Sarah, the quiet one, who followed me in the garden like a shadow made of kindness. Back then, I believed, honestly believed, that I had found my forever place, that peace could last, that the life inside those walls would stay gentle. If someone had told me that everything would one day crack, that peace can turn to fear in a single season, I would have smiled and shaken my head. Because in those first years, inside those quiet walls, for the first time in my life, I finally felt like I belonged. And I had no idea how much it would cost me later. Life inside Street Mary of Peace was simple, and for a long time, that simplicity felt like a blessing. Our days followed a rhythm that never changed. Wake before the sun, morning prayers, breakfast, work. Afternoon silence, evening prayers, sleep. It sounds repetitive, but to me, it felt steady, almost comforting. A world with edges I could finally understand. The chapel was always cool in the mornings. When we lit the candles, the whole room seemed to breathe quietly with us. I liked those moments. They made me feel grounded, safe. After prayers, everyone drifted to their tasks. Mine was the garden, the soil, the neat rows, the quiet way things grew if you were patient enough. The other sisters had their own routines. Joy taught catechism to the local children. She'd come back laughing, saying, "One boy asked if angels wear shoes." I told him probably not. Martha lived in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, pots steaming. "Grace," she'd call, "taste this stew. Tell me if it needs more salt." Eleanor read constantly. I once teased her, "Do you ever stop thinking?" She didn't even look up, "Not if I can help it." And Sarah, sweet Sarah, she followed me into the garden almost every day. She spoke softly, like her voice belonged to another time. "Do you think God hears us even when we don't say the words out loud?" I told her. I hope so. We weren't just nuns living in the same building. We were something closer to a family. We worked together, prayed together, shared small stories to shake off long days. There were no secrets then, no fear, just ordinary peace, the kind that slips into your bones before you realize how lucky you are to have it. Looking back now, those memories almost ache, not because anything was wrong, but because everything was right. Peace is easy to take for granted when you don't know it's about to disappear. If someone had walked into the convent during those years and warned us, told us our quiet world would soon crack open, we would have laughed. But darkness doesn't knock, it doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly. And for us, it began with something so small, I almost ignored it. One morning, the keys clicked in the hallway. At the wrong hour, a sound out of place. A mistake in the rhythm, just one note wrong in an otherwise perfect day. I didn't know it then, none of us did. But that tiny sound was the first crack in our world, and everything that followed began right there. The day Father Michael arrived, the whole convent felt different. People were excited, almost buzzing. You could hear it in the way the sisters talked a little faster, moved a little quicker. A new priest was a big deal for a small parish like ours. When he walked into the chapel for the first time, everyone straightened up. He carried himself with a kind of practiced confidence, like he already knew exactly where he would fit. His voice during Mass was louder than we were used to, booming, commanding, filling every corner until it felt like the room had shrunk a little. Some of the sisters whispered afterward, "He is impressive, or he will bring new energy here." But for me, something felt slightly off. Not enough to speak out loud, just enough to make my stomach tighten. It was the way he watched people. Not glancing, tracking, and the faint, sharp scent of his cologne that seemed to linger even after Head left a room. I told myself I was imagining it. "He is just adjusting," Martha said. "He seems very dedicated," Joy added. Even Eleanor said, "Give him time, Grace." So I tried. But somehow, he was everywhere. Each question made my pulse skip, though I couldn't explain why. I'd feel my fingers tighten around the handle of my trowel without meaning to, like my body understood something before my mind did. In confession, his questions edged into places that had nothing to do with prayer. "Tell me about your private struggles," he urged. "Speak freely. God favors honesty." My throat would go dry, my palms damp, something in me shrinking back, even though I sat perfectly still. One afternoon, he placed his hand on my shoulder while speaking to me. Not harsh. Just a moment too long. A pressure that made my breath catch before I could hide it. He smiled. One of those smiles that never reached his eyes. And for a second, I felt the room tilt. Sarah noticed him too. She started taking longer routes between chores, choosing hallways she never used to avoid. One evening I caught her standing frozen outside the chapel door, fingers digging into her sleeves. "Are you all right?" I asked. She shook her head and whispered, "I do not like how he looks at us." Just 7 words. But they settled into me like a stone. Still, I kept telling myself we were misreading him, that a priest couldn't mean harm. That unease wasn't evidence, but fear has a way of knowing before truth catches up. Father Michael's arrival was the first quiet disturbance, a tiny shift in the rhythm of the convent, the kind you don't recognize until the keys start clicking at the wrong hour, and none of us understood how deeply that broken rhythm would reshape our lives. Things did not fall apart overnight. It happened slowly, quietly, like something slipping through a crack without anyone noticing. But once you start seeing the shift, you cannot unsee it. Sarah changed first. Mornings went quiet. No humming. No lingering by the windows. Even her little whisper of what a lovely day disappeared. One time, when Father Michael's voice echoed from the chapel, she flinched so hard she dropped the basket she was carrying. Apples rolled across the stone floor. They sounded too loud in that holy silence. I knelt beside her. "Sarah, what is going on?" She forced a fragile smile. "I am fine, Grace." But her hands were trembling as she gathered the apples. Then Joy. Our Joy, who used to laugh so loudly the whole hallway rang, now laughed only in tiny breaths, like she was afraid the sound might draw attention. Some nights, muffled crying slipped through her door. When I knocked, she always said, "Just tired, that is all." But her voice had the thinness of someone trying to hold herself together. Eleanor hid in the library more often, not reading with her old curiosity, but clutching books like shields. Her eyes stayed on the page, but they no longer moved the way they used to. Martha watched everything. Her steps were slower, careful, as if measuring distances between footsteps behind her. One morning, while chopping herbs, she leaned closer and whispered, "He is watching all of us. Be careful." A chill slid through me before I even understood why. Meanwhile, Father Michael grew bolder. He separated us with polite excuses. "Sarah, meet me in the sacristy." "Joy, I need your help organizing." "Grace, stay after prayers." His tone stayed calm, respectful. But underneath, something shifted. The rhythm was breaking, quietly, one beat at a time. Confession turned into the moment we dreaded most. The booth felt smaller each week. His questions wandered away from faith and into places they had no right to go. I would step out with my heartbeat lodged in my throat, my palms cold. At dinner, whispers moved across the table like wind slipping through cracks. Eleanor murmured, "His visits do not feel random." Joy nodded quickly. "It is like he waits until we are alone." Sarah said nothing. She only stared at her hands, knuckles white. We were scared. All of us. But fear inside a convent does not shout. It coils quietly. Tangled with guilt and obedience and trust, we were raised not to question. Because he was a priest, because holy walls are supposed to protect you, because believing otherwise felt like a kind of betrayal. And yet the truth kept rising, slow and undeniable. Our peace was thinning. And we all knew it, long before any of us found the courage to say the words out loud. Things changed the moment Mother Agnes got sick. It happened fast, too fast. One day she was walking the halls reminding Joy not to burn the bread again, and the next morning she was coughing so hard she could not sit upright. Just like that. The strongest person in our world could not even stand. The doctor said one word, pneumonia, and the whole convent seemed to hold its breath. Martha whispered, "We cannot lose her," and her voice cracked in a way I had never, ever heard before. We took turns caring for her. I remember sitting beside her bed, holding a bowl of warm broth, she tried to joke. Grace, if you spill that on me, I will haunt you. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if I let myself cry, I would not stop. Her face looked smaller, her hands colder. She had always been the steady one, the one whose steps you could recognize from down the corridor. Now the hallway felt wrong without her rhythm in it. And while we were busy worrying about her health, someone else noticed the opening. Father Michael. With Mother Agnes bedridden, he suddenly had access to places he never belonged. He walked the halls more often. He paused in doorways a beat too long. His footsteps echoed in times of day we never used to hear him. One afternoon, when I left her room, he was waiting near the stairs. He smiled. You must all be overwhelmed. If you need guidance, spiritual or otherwise, I'm here. Nothing in the sentence was improper, but the look behind it, a slow, evaluating stare, made the back of my neck prickle. That night, in the kitchen, Sarah whispered, "Why is he here so much now?" Joy wrapped her arms around herself. Because she's not. She didn't have to say who. Without Mother Agnes walking the halls, the whole convent felt unguarded, the air heavier, the silence deeper. Even the prayers sounded thinner, like the walls were listening for something we weren't ready to hear. I kept hoping she would get better, that we'd hear her keys again, that steady, comfortingly predictable jingle as she walked, letting us know everything was still all right. But the coughing got worse. Her voice grew faint, and every day that passed, Father Michael's presence grew louder. The truth was clear. Even if no one dared speak it, she wasn't recovering. And he knew she wasn't recovering. The shield we had lived under for years was slipping, and we were standing in the open, with no idea what was coming next. I remember the moment everything changed. And it was not subtle. It hit like a door slamming. I had gone into the library that afternoon, just to return a book for Eleanor. A small, ordinary errand, nothing that should have mattered. I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and froze so suddenly my breath caught. Sarah was pinned against a bookshelf, not by force you could see, but by fear you could feel. Her hands trembled, her eyes, wide, pleading, locked on mine for half a second, and Father Michael had her wrist in his hand, not gently, not accidentally, a grip with intention. For a moment, no one moved. Even the dust in the air felt suspended. When he noticed me, he didn't flinch. He didn't jerk away like a man who'd been caught doing something wrong. He simply released her, slowly, like he was choosing the moment, like control was still his. Sarah slipped past me so quickly, her shoulder brushed mine. Her breath hitched. She didn't look back. Father Michael only smiled, a small, cold smile that never reached his eyes. My throat tightened. My feet stayed rooted to the floor. A part of me whispered, "Don't react, don't give him anything." But my heart was pounding so hard it felt loud in the silence. Later that night, I found Eleanor in the study room. "We need to talk," I said. My voice wasn't steady. She closed her book. "You look pale. What happened?" I sat beside her, gripping my knees to keep my hands from shaking. "I saw him," I said quietly. "In the library. With Sarah." Color drained from her face. "Grace. Are you sure?" "Yes." My voice cracked on the word. "Completely." She didn't argue, didn't offer excuses. She just stared at the floor, fingers digging into the table's edge, like she needed something solid to keep her from unraveling. For days, Sarah avoided us. She stopped sitting near us at meals, stopped joining us in the garden. Whenever we tried to speak to her, she shook her head, eyes full of something like shame or fear, maybe both. At dinner, she barely touched her food. At prayers, she kept her gaze fixed on the floor. Once, I heard her crying in the hallway, but the moment I stepped toward her, she ran. Joy pulled me aside one evening. "Do you think he hurt her?" she whispered. I swallowed. "I think something is deeply wrong." There was no pretending anymore, no comforting lies, no maybe you misread it, no he's a priest, it must be fine. The truth was standing right in front of us, breathing our air. The moment in the library wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation and a warning. We were not imagining the danger. We were standing inside it. After what I saw in the library, the pieces didn't suddenly fall into place. They clicked, one by one, like keys turning in a door I hadn't realized was locked. Nothing new happened at first, but suddenly, everything I'd ignored started glowing at the edges. Father Michael wasn't appearing near us by chance. He was choosing his moments. Sarah, meet me in the sacristy later. Joy, I need help with the hymnals. Grace, come to the library after evening prayers. Always polite. Always calm. Always when we were alone. One evening at dinner, Joy leaned toward me, her spoon barely steady in her hand. He watches me, she whispered. Even when I'm not looking, I feel it. I asked quietly, did he touch you? She hesitated. Her throat worked before words came. Not like Sarah, she said. But yesterday, he grabbed my arm. Hard. Her voice shook. That alone terrified me. Even Martha, steady, unshakable Martha, finally spoke one morning as we folded linens. He is testing boundaries, she said. And we are letting him. I stared at her. Then what do we do? She didn't answer right away, just folded another sheet with slow, deliberate care. We stay alert, she said, and we stay together. That night, I found Eleanor in the library, surrounded by scraps of paper. I saw you writing, I said. What is all this? She didn't look up immediately. Documentation, she whispered. Dates, times, where he is, who he speaks to, what changes. I sat beside her. Do you think it will help? It is the only thing we have right now, she said. Our minds are frightened. Paper is steady, so we watched him, quietly. And the pattern sharpened. He sought the youngest. He waited for silence. He used guidance to isolate. He used confession to push where no priest should push. And Sarah shrank day by day. She stopped humming, stopped sitting with us, jumped at every footstep in the halls. One afternoon, when I gently touched her shoulder, she recoiled like she'd been burned. Her breath broke in her throat. I wanted to run to Mother Agnes, but she was still too ill to rise. I wanted to scream for help, but there was no one outside those walls to hear us. It hit me then, deep in my chest, cold as stone. We were alone. And this wasn't misunderstanding, wasn't imagination, wasn't nerves. This was a pattern, deliberate, controlled, growing bolder by the day. It was standing right in front of us, and it wasn't going away. The night everything inside me finally broke was the night Sarah came to my room shaking so badly she could barely stay upright. Her cheek was flushed, her habit torn at the shoulder. She didn't need to say a word, but she whispered anyway. He said it was penance, she sobbed. He said God wanted this. My whole body went cold. I pulled her onto my bed and held her hands. Sarah, that isn't God. Has using God to hurt you. She clung to me, crying so hard her breath hitched. I held her until she finally slept. But I did not sleep at all. By morning, the decision was already carved into me. Someone had to help us. Someone had to listen. And surely, the one person above Father Michael would care. I found Martha in the infirmary. I need to leave the convent for a few hours, I said. Her eyes tightened. This is about him? Yes. She hesitated only a second. Be careful, Grace. I walked to town with my heart pounding, Eleanor's notes pressed tight against my chest. In the bishop's waiting room, every sound scraped my nerves raw. The clock ticked too loudly. My palms left damp crescents on the folder. And every time the hallway door opened, my spine locked straight. After nearly 2 hours, a door creaked open. Sister Grace, he said gently. Relief flooded me so fast it almost hurt. I sat, and I told him everything. What Sarah whispered. What Joy admitted. What I had seen with my own eyes. The patterns we documented. the fear none of us could outrun. I expected outrage. I expected urgency. Instead, he leaned back and said, almost bored, "These are serious accusations. Are you certain you're not misreading his intentions?" It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. "Your Excellency," I whispered. I watched him corner her. He sighed, like I'd handed him paperwork, not a crime. "Father Michael is well regarded. We must avoid misunderstandings. A public scandal would damage the church." "What about us?" He stood, ending the conversation with the ease of closing a book. "I will look into it. Until then, silence. You must not speak of this, unless I ask you." I left his office shaking, not from fear, but from a betrayal so sharp it felt like it lived under my skin. 2 days later, I crossed paths with Father Michael in the narrow hallway. His footsteps echoed, slow, patient. When he passed me, he leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "Careful, Sister Grace," he murmured. "Truth can be sinful in the wrong hands." A chill slid down my spine like ice water, and in that moment, I finally understood. No one was coming to save us. Not the bishop, not the church, not anyone outside those walls. We were alone, and he knew it. I knew something was wrong the moment Sister Helen asked me to come to the office. Her voice was too soft, too careful, like she already knew what waited for me inside. When I stepped through the door, Father Michael stood beside the Mother Superior's empty chair. That chair had always felt steady, grounding. Without her in it, the entire room felt off balance. He held a sheet of paper the way some men hold weapons. "Sit down, Sister Grace," he said, too polite, too rehearsed. I stayed standing. He began to read. Insubordination, emotional instability, defamation against a priest. You are to be transferred immediately to Our Lady of Mercy Convent in Montana. Montana, as far as they could send me without burying me? My stomach dropped. "This is not true," I said, turning to the others. "You know this is not true." But Eleanor's hands trembled. Joy stared at the floor, Martha's jaw locked tight. They wanted to defend me. I could feel it. But fear had taken their voices one by one. Father Michael stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was offering me guidance instead of a threat. "The bishop informed me of your accusations," he said. "Accusations backed by evidence," I replied, my pulse sharp and hot. He smiled. A small curve of the mouth with nothing behind the eyes. "You should be careful, Sister Grace. False testimony is a grave sin." I said it anyway. "You hurt Sarah. You have hurt several of us. And you know it." His whisper slid in like a blade. "Say one more word, and I'll make sure the others pay for your disobedience." My breath stopped. Not from fear. Fear I understood. This was leverage. Sister Helen cleared her throat. "Grace, a change of environment might do you good." I stared at her. "You think I imagined this?" She looked down. "I think you are. Overwhelmed. Overwhelmed." That was their word. Not the bruises, not the shaking hands, not the records Eleanor hid under her mattress, just overwhelmed. I walked out before any of them could say another word. My hands shook so violently I had to brace myself against the wall. Behind me, no footsteps followed. No one called after me. In the dormitory, the hallway felt hollow, like even the building knew what had just happened. On my bed sat a suitcase, already packed by someone else's decision. A neat little way to make me disappear. Leaving meant abandoning the others. Staying meant facing him. But there was a third path. One he could not control. "We will not survive this unless we leave," I whispered into the silent room. And something inside me hardened. Clean, steady, final. If the church would not protect us, then we would protect each other. This was the moment escape stopped being a thought and became a plan. The night I realized we had to escape, I was not feeling brave at all. Honestly, I was terrified. But fear can corner you so tightly that running becomes the only choice that feels like survival. I walked down to the cellar after evening prayers, my hands shaking so hard I had to hide them in my sleeves. The air down there always smelled of damp stone, heavy, unsettled. The others were already waiting, perched on old crates like they were bracing for a verdict. Joy tried to smile. "Grace, you look like you're about to faint." "I feel like it," I whispered. I took a breath that barely settled in my chest. "We need to leave," I said. "All of us. Soon. As soon as we have a window." The room froze. Sarah's voice cracked. "Leave? Leave the convent?" "Yes," I said. "If we stay, hell pick us off one by one." Eleanor pressed her fingers to her temple. "Grace, do you realize what you're saying? We could be excommunicated, punished, labeled unstable for life." "I know," I said softly. "And I accept that. Labels won't matter if we're gone." Martha crossed her arms, jaw set. "How? We have no money, no real clothes, no transportation, no plan." "Well, make one," I said. "We're smarter than he thinks." Joy let out a shaky laugh, small but real. "Well, if we're running away, I'm bringing my slippers. They're the only comfortable thing I own." We laughed, and for a heartbeat the fear cracked open just enough for something human to slip through. Then Eleanor's voice steadied. "If we're doing this, we need more than courage. We need a way out that won't get us caught before we reach the gate." "I have someone," I said quietly. "Mr. Miller, the delivery man who brings flour every Thursday, has seen things. He doesn't look away." Sarah hugged herself. "Grace, will he believe us?" "He doesn't have to believe everything," I said. "He just has to help us leave." The quiet shifted, no longer paralyzed, but sharpening into purpose. Martha nodded first. Then, it settled. "We run." Hearing her say it out loud made my heartbeat trip and steady at the same time. This wasn't fear talking anymore. This was a decision. 5 nuns, no resources, no protection, and a door closing tighter every day. But for the first time in months, we had something that didn't tremble when he walked past. Hope. Small, flickering, but alive. And hope, once awake, refuses to sleep again. Getting out of the convent sounded brave when we whispered about it in the cellar, but by the next morning, the bravery felt thin. Reality is heavier than hope. We had no money, no real clothes besides our habits, no destination, just fear, and the knowledge that staying meant disappearing one by one. I found myself staring at the garden tools as if a shovel or rake might whisper a plan to me. That was when Mr. Miller showed up. He came every Thursday with supplies, flour, vegetables, whatever the kitchen needed. A quiet man, always polite, boots dusty from the long walk up the road. "Looked at me a beat too long, Sister Grace. You look tired. Something happened?" I tried to smile. "Just a long week." He shook his head. "No, this is more than that." I hesitated, a long, painful hesitation. Then I whispered, "Mr. Miller, if I tell you something, can you keep it to yourself?" He set the crate down, slow, deliberate. "You have my word." Then he added, almost as if reading my fear, "If I wanted to turn you in, I'd already have done it." So I told him. Not all of it. We didn't even have words for all of it. But enough. Enough for his jaw to tighten. Enough for his hands to curl into fists. He immediately unclenched. "My daughter was a nun," he said quietly. "She left her convent years ago. Something happened to her. Something terrible. She never said his name." His voice cracked like dry wood. "I won't let that happen to you girls." For the first time in days, something in my chest loosened. "We want to escape," I whispered, "but we have no plan." He glanced toward the far wall, toward the oak tree. Then softer, "I can leave a rope ladder there on the night you choose, and my truck will be waiting just beyond the bend. Lights off, engine cold." When I brought the news back to the others, their reactions tangled together. Joy's eyes brightened. Hez really helping us? Yes. Martha crossed her arms. We're trusting a man we barely know. We don't have anyone else, Eleanor answered. Sarah looked at me, small and scared. Do you trust him, Grace? I took a long breath and nodded. I do. It wasn't a perfect plan. It wasn't safe. But it was the first lifeline Wed had since the walls started closing in. And for the first time, escape didn't feel like desperation. It felt possible. Looking back now, I still believe this. If God ever sent us a miracle, it arrived wearing muddy boots, carrying a crate of Thursday supplies, and offering 5 terrified women a way out of the dark. Once we knew Mr. Miller would help us, everything changed. The fear didn't fade, it sharpened. But now it sat beside something new. Determination. A chance. A real one. And we weren't going to waste it. Sister Helen had been watching the hallways more than usual, like she was counting footsteps too. I didn't understand it then. Later, it made perfect sense. We gathered in the cellar again after evening prayers. The air felt still. Too still. All right, Eleanor said, spreading out a few sheets of paper. We need new identities. Names, backgrounds, the whole thing. She hesitated, then added, not forever, just long enough to disappear. Joy lifted her hand like a schoolgirl. Can I choose a name that sounds fun? Martha sighed. This is not a vacation, Joy. Joy shrugged. I know. But if we're starting new lives, I want a name I actually like. We laughed. Quiet, shaky, the kind of laugh that feels borrowed. Eleanor continued. We also need civilian clothes. We can't run in our habits. Ask Mr. Miller, I said. He knows people who owe him favors. Sarah whispered. Will he be safe helping us? Martha answered. Hess already in danger just by knowing. The preparations began. A quiet choreography of survival. Over the next few days, everything fell into a rhythm that wasn't prayer anymore. It was strategy. Eleanor stole minutes in the office and copied the records they kept on us. Intake files, letters, anything that held our real names. Joy pocketed medicine for headaches. Martha hid food in cloth bags and slipped them under loose boards. And Sarah kept folding the clothes Mr. Miller brought, touching them like they might vanish if she blinked. Then came the moment none of us expected. One night, the cellar door creaked open. We froze. Sister Helen stepped inside. Joy whispered, "We're caught." But Helen didn't scold us, didn't even look afraid. She walked toward us, slow and certain, pulled a small cloth pouch from her pocket and placed it into Martha's hands. "These are my savings," she said softly. "Take them." Martha stared. "Why would you do this?" Helen's voice wavered. "Because I've seen enough. And because staying will break you." The silence that followed wasn't fear. It was gratitude so sharp it hurt. The escape plan crystallized. We would wait for a storm, use the rope ladder at the weak section of the wall, behind the oak, hidden from the road, then run toward the bend where Mr. Miller would wait. Engine off. Lights dark. Eleanor folded her notes. If we get caught, everything ends. I shook my head gently. So we don't get caught. Not once. 5 women, terrified, but ready, because hope is loud when it comes back, even whispered in a cellar, even shared between trembling hands. And for the first time, escaping didn't feel impossible. It felt inevitable. The night we escaped didn't feel real at first. The wind was already rising, sharp, restless, pushing at the convent walls like it wanted in. Storm clouds stacked over the roof, low and heavy, as if the sky itself had been waiting for this moment. We met in the hallway outside the storage room. Nobody spoke. 5 women in habits, silently acknowledging that this might be the last breath we ever took, inside the place that once felt like home. Joy whispered, "If anyone sees us, just pretend we're checking the roof for leaks." Even then, her humor cracked through the fear like a match in a cave. Martha hissed, "Joy, focus." I led us down the back stairwell. Every step creaked too loudly, each sound slicing through my nerves. My hands shook so badly I had to pin them against my sides to keep from dropping the lantern. Sarah caught my arm. "Grace. What if we can't do this?" I squeezed her hand. "We already are." We stepped outside, and the storm took us whole. Wind tore at our veils. Rain slapped against our faces. Perfect cover. No footsteps to echo. No eyes to see us. We ran across the courtyard, habits snapping around our legs, hearts pounding in uneven sync. Eleanor pointed through the rain. "There! The oak!" The rope ladder swung wildly against the stone, just where Mr. Miller said it would be, hidden from the road. Invisible, unless you already knew it was there. "I'll go first," I said, though my voice sounded like someone else's. Climbing felt like dragging myself out of a life that wanted to hold me down. The rungs were slick. The storm pressed against my back. Halfway up, lightning cracked, bright enough to sketch the world in white. At the top, I whispered, "Next." Joy climbed fast, Eleanor steady, Martha silent and strong. Sarah froze halfway up. Her foot slipped. "Grace, I'm falling." "No, you're not," I called down. "Look at me, just me." Her shaking hand reached one rung higher, then another. When she finally reached the top, she collapsed against me, breathless. On the outside of the wall, we didn't run. Not at first. We just stood there, soaked, shaking, stunned. The low rumble of an engine somewhere down the road. Joy whispered, "That has to be him." We ran. Through mud, through darkness, through terror, toward that sound, like it was the only thing keeping our hearts beating. Mr. Miller swung open the truck door, shouting over the storm, "Get in!" And the moment my foot hit the metal step, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The truck ride measured itself in bumps and silence. Every jolt felt like another question I was too afraid to ask out loud. None of us spoke. We sat, soaked and shivering in the back, holding on to each other like the storm might tear one of us away if we loosened our grip. When Mr. Miller finally turned onto a narrow dirt road, he said, "We're almost there. Hold on." He stopped beside an old wooden barn, leaning. Forgotten. He pushed the door open and waved us inside. "You'll be safe here for tonight," he said. "No one comes out this way anymore." The air smelled of hay and dust, warmer than the storm, but no less heavy. The lantern he lit trembled against the walls. Sarah hugged herself tightly. "Is this really happening?" I wrapped an arm around her. "Yes, and we're together. That's what matters." Martha shut the barn door and slid the latch. "We stay quiet." Eleanor gave a tense nod, barely audible. "If they're searching for us, they'll start near the convent." Joy sat on a pile of blankets. "So, we're fugitives now." "Great." We laughed, quiet, shaky. Fear sometimes lets humor slip through the cracks. A few minutes later, Mr. Miller returned with dry clothes and a bag of food. "You should change out of those wet habits," he said. Then, softer, "You can't run from anyone dressed like nuns." We changed behind a row of barrels while the others kept watch. Putting on ordinary clothes felt unreal. Without the habit, I felt exposed, like the world could finally see me. Sarah stared at herself, voice trembling. "I don't even recognize this girl." I rested a hand on her arm. "Maybe that's a good thing." Night thickened around us. The rain slowed, but inside the barn, every sound tightened the air. A shifting board, a gust of wind, the creak of old beams. Then, somewhere far off, a car engine. Then silence. We froze. I could hear my own pulse. Eleanor leaned close, voice barely there. "What if someone saw us climb the wall?" We moved quietly. I kept my voice low, and the storm covered us. But doubt gnawed at me anyway. Near midnight, a siren wailed in the distance, thin, stretched by the wind. Sarah grabbed my hand. "They're looking for us." "Yes," I said. "But they won't find us here." We huddled close on the cold barn floor, 5 women in borrowed clothes, terrified, exhausted, clinging to the one thing nobody could take from us. For one fragile moment, we believed we'd outrun it. We hadn't. But we were free. We were alive, and dawn was still coming. The morning after we hid in the barn, something strange happened. For the first time in months, we woke without the echo of Father Michael's footsteps. That silence felt borrowed, fragile. Mr. Miller arrived just after sunrise with a thermos of hot tea and a small, tired smile. "You all look less like ghosts today," he said. Joy groaned under a blanket. "Good. Because I feel like one." Even Sarah managed a tiny smile. He loaded us into his truck again. The road felt smoother than it had any right to. No storm, no shouting, no alarms. But every time the truck slowed, my body prepared for a knock on the window. Every mile put more distance between us and Havenwood, but my shoulders never dropped, not once. At last, he turned down a narrow dirt road and parked beside a small house tucked behind winter-bare trees. Mrs. Turner opened the door and blinked at us. "These are the sisters?" "Not anymore," Mr. Miller said gently. She nodded. "Well, come inside. You all look half frozen." The kitchen smelled like fresh biscuits, warm, ordinary, safe, in a way that almost hurt to feel. Eleanor pulled out her notes like they were oxygen. "We need new names, new histories, answers we can say without shaking." Joy raised her hand. "Make me a dancer." Martha sighed. "We are supposed to blend in." Joy shrugged. "Fine, make me boring." We laughed, quiet, thin, but real. Then we chose. Eleanor became Ellen Brooks. Joy became Julia Mason. Martha became Mary Collins. Sarah chose Sarah Lane. She couldn't let go of everything. And I became Grace Miller, borrowing Mr. Miller's last name because he insisted. When he said, "It'll be easier to explain," I felt something inside me settle and tremble at the same time. Mrs. Turner brought out die and scissors. She chopped Martha's hair short, curled Ellen's, muted Joy's copper down to something forgettable, softened mine to a warm brown. Joy squinted at the mirror. "I look like a schoolteacher." "You look safe," I told her. Without the habit, I felt exposed, like the world could finally see me. And unexpectedly, that wasn't entirely frightening. Mrs. Turner laid 5 sets of clothes on the table. "Nothing fancy," she said. "But clean?" I touched the fabric, and something shifted. A soft click, like a lock opening. For the first time, the women staring back at us in the mirror weren't nuns. They weren't only victims anymore. They were strangers, women we were choosing to become. We were still scared, still shaking, still unsure of everything ahead of us. But we had names, clothes, a roof, a chance, and that alone felt like rebirth. Starting over sounded simple when we whispered about it in the cellar. But starting over in the real world, no habits, no convent rules, no walls to hide behind, that was something else entirely. Mr. Miller drove us to Cleveland a few days after we settled at Mrs. Turner's. As we entered the city, a cold wind from Lake Erie cut straight through the truck windows, sharp, metallic, carrying the smell of diesel and wet pavement. He stopped in front of a worn-down brick apartment building and cut the engine. "This is as far as I can take you," he said softly. "You'll be safe here." Joy wrapped her arms around him so tight he wheezed. He laughed through it. "All right now. Stronger than you look." Inside the apartment, the world felt loud. The floor creaked. The refrigerator hummed like it had something to say. Someone's radio thumped through the thin walls. Sarah covered her ears. "It is so loud." "That's just life out here," Martha murmured, though even she jumped when a passing train rattled the windows. 5 women, 1 room, borrowed bills that felt like they might evaporate by morning. We needed work. Fast. Mrs. Turner had a friend who owned a garment factory and arranged interviews. The next week, we sat in a row in front of a tired-looking manager with glasses sliding down her nose. She scanned us, slowly. "Which one of you is Ellen? Parker?" she asked. Eleanor froze for half a second, too long. My heart stopped. Then she forced a smile. "That's me." The manager shrugged. "Uninterested. Thank God." "Ever done factory work?" All 5 of us shook our heads. She sighed. Can you sew? Martha lifted her chin. We can learn. The manager kept staring, like she was trying to place us. Where'd you all work before this? My stomach tightened. Joy jumped in quickly, bright as ever. Small-town tailoring shop, Ohio. Her voice was steady, too steady. The manager blinked, decided she didn't care enough to dig further, and waved us on. Training starts Monday. Don't be late. That was our first Sweitlow. Small, invisible to anyone else, but it left my pulse running wild for an hour. Factory life was chaos. Machines clicking non-stop, needles snapping, steam hissing, shouting across rows of humming tables. The smell of fabric dye soaked into everything. Eleanor poked her sewing machine like it might come alive and bite her. Joy leaned over and whispered, "If this thing takes my finger, I'm quitting." I whispered back, "We need both the finger and the paycheck." We learned, slowly, painfully, one mistake at a time. And after the first week, we stumbled home exhausted, aching, but strangely proud. At night, we practiced our new identities around the dinner table. Birthplace? Eleanor quizzed. Ohio, Joy answered, then paused. Not Indiana this time. Martha groaned. Joy, please. We need one childhood, not three. We laughed. Real laughter, the kind that loosened something in our chests. Still, whenever footsteps rushed past our door, all of us went silent. Whenever someone knocked in the hallway, my breath stopped until the sound faded. Fear travels with you, even when you think you left it behind. But Cleveland, noisy, messy, unpredictable, was ours. And for women who once feared every footstep in a hallway, that noise finally sounded like freedom. Life in Cleveland slowly took shape. Work, rent, groceries, bills, things we never had to think about in the convent were suddenly part of our daily routine. And in a strange way, we felt proud of ourselves. We were learning how to live, how to stand on our own feet. But then Martha got sick. It started subtly. She'd come home from the factory and sit down before even taking off her shoes. Martha, are you all right? I asked one evening. She waved me off. I'm just tired. But her tired kept growing. A week later, she collapsed at work. The factory manager called us, her voice clipped and frightened. You need to come. It's serious. At the hospital, the doctor told us her heart had been failing quietly, invisibly, for years. Her condition is advanced, he said gently. We'll do what we can. And I understood what he wasn't saying. Sarah broke down on the spot. Joy kept pacing in tight circles, whispering, Not now. Please, not now. Eleanor stood perfectly still, holding Martha's rosary so tightly her knuckles went white. For days, we sat beside her bed. She slept most of the time, waking only long enough to give us a small, tired smile. You girls worry too much, she whispered once. Joy tried to brighten. We always worry about you, Martha chuckled weakly. Then stop. Worrying never fixed anything. But the moment that stays with me is when she tugged my hand and pulled me close. Her voice barely moved the air. Grace, don't let fear drive your life. You hear me? Tears burned my eyes. I hear you. Good, she breathed. Then live. All of you. Live the life we ran to find. She slipped away the next morning. Quietly. Like she was still taking care of us. We were not prepared. How could we be? We had survived a convent, a predator, betrayal, escape, but nothing had taught us how to lose one of our own. And because our identities were false, we couldn't bury her under her real name. The hospital paperwork read Mary Collins, a woman who technically never existed. At the funeral, Sarah whispered, It feels like they erased her twice. I held her hand. She didn't disappear. Not to us. But that night, sitting around the wobbly kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where Martha used to drink her tea, a heavy truth settled in. Freedom had a cost. And this was the first one we paid. After Martha passed, the apartment felt different, quieter, heavier. Some nights it felt like grief sat at the table with us, breathing softly, waiting for someone to say her name. And then something happened that made everything worse. One evening, I stopped at a corner grocery after work. While standing in line, a headline stared back at me from the counter. Sharp, bold, impossible to ignore. Father Michael O'Connor, honored by diocese for outstanding service. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. His photograph was there too, smiling, proud, like a man who'd never harmed a soul. I didn't remember paying. I just walked home holding the paper like it burned. When I dropped it onto the kitchen table, Joy grabbed it first. "Is this a joke?" she whispered. Eleanor read the article without blinking, but her jaw tightened until the muscle trembled. Sarah backed into the corner, whispering, "Hez still out there. Hez still doing it." I sank into the chair. If Hez being celebrated, then the world chose him, not us. A familiar cold fear crept back into the room, the kind that used to live in our bones, because praise like that meant protection, and protection meant he wasn't stopping any time soon. That night, Eleanor closed her notebook. "We can't stay here. If anyone recognizes us, or if the church starts asking questions, we won't survive it." Joy sighed, long and tired. "Move again?" We finally remembered which bus goes downtown. But no one argued. Packing was harder this time, not because of what we owned, but because this place had been our first room that felt like home. Still, we packed. Mr. Miller helped us one last time. He pressed the tickets into my hands and said quietly, "Keep your heads down, and don't look back." On the bus, Sarah sat rigid beside me, fingers digging into her sleeves. "Grace," she whispered, "what if he comes looking for us?" "He won't," I said softly. "We're going somewhere new." Charlotte greeted us with a different kind of noise. The hum of late-night traffic, the distant clatter of a streetcar, the sticky warmth that smelled faintly of fried food and wet pavement. A city that didn't know us. A city that didn't ask. The rental house was small, a little crooked, but the landlord didn't ask questions, and that alone felt like mercy. We sat on the floor that first night, eating sandwiches off paper towels. Joy sighed, starting over again. Third time, Eleanor nodded. "As long as he's free? Well, always check behind us." I wanted to promise safety. I wanted to promise healing. But the truth settled in my chest like a stone. Running kept us alive, but it never quieted the shadow that followed us everywhere. Life in Charlotte should have been a fresh start, but it wasn't. Not long after we settled into the small rental house, Eleanor began feeling unwell. At first, she brushed it off. "I'm just tired," she kept saying. But the tiredness didn't pass. It hollowed her from the inside. Then one morning, she collapsed in the kitchen. Joy screamed for me, and we rushed her to the hospital. Hours later, the doctor stepped in. Quiet voice, grave eyes. "She has late-stage cancer," he said. "It has already spread." Sarah covered her mouth, shaking. Joy whispered, "No, not again." And I just stared at the floor, unable to find breath. Eleanor took the news calmly. Too calmly. Even sick, she still lined her sentences up neatly, like she was organizing a list no one else could see. Back home, she gathered us in the living room. Her voice was thin, but steady, exactly like her. From beneath her blanket, she drew out a small, worn notebook, the same one she had filled years ago documenting everything about Father Michael. She set it in my lap. "I want you to have this, Grace." I shook my head. "Eleanor, no, that's your work." "It's our truth," she corrected. "And you'll know when to hand it to the world." Joy wiped at her eyes. "Stop talking like that. You're not going anywhere." Eleanor smiled, exhausted, but sure. "I just don't want our story dying because I did." Later, when the others slept, she called me back to her room. "Grace, promise me something." I sat beside her. "Anything. Promise you'll put our names back where they belong." Out loud. Her fingers were light in mine, like she was already letting go. "I promise," I whispered. She exhaled, a soft, relieved breath. "Good. Then I can rest." Eleanor died 3 weeks later. We buried her under the name Ellen Brooks because we had no choice. It felt wrong, like we were sealing her inside another lie. Sarah cried until her voice broke. Joy tried to be strong and failed. And I slept with the notebook under my pillow, like a weapon I didn't yet know how to use. Losing Eleanor cracked something in all of us, but her final words planted something too, a responsibility, a truth waiting for its hour. The strange thing about life is that it does not stop to let you grieve. Even when your heart is breaking, the world keeps moving. Bills keep coming. I signed forms with a name that wasn't mine, and it felt like lying on her grave. Morning arrives whether you want it to or not. After Eleanor died, the house felt painfully empty. Some days, Joy tried to brighten the mood. If Eleanor were here, she'd tell us we looked terrible. Sarah sniffed through a laugh. She'd also tell us to clean the kitchen. For a moment, those tiny jokes helped. But grief has a long shadow, and it followed us everywhere. Work continued at the garment factory. The machines didn't care that we were mourning. They just clattered on, metal over metal. One afternoon, Sarah dropped a stack of fabric and burst into tears. Exhaustion finally winning. I pulled her into the supply room and held her until her breaths steadied. Joy struggled in her own quiet way. One night she sat at the kitchen table, staring at her hands. "Does healing ever get easier?" she whispered. "Or do we just get used to hurting?" I didn't know how to answer her. We blinked, and years were gone. We kept our heads down, lived quietly, paid rent, learned how to blend in. But underneath it all was a constant hum, the fear that someone from the church might find us, or worse, that Father Michael was still out there. Then came the second blow. Sarah received a phone call while we were making dinner. Her hand trembled the whole time she held the phone. When she hung up, she whispered, "It's Joy." She collapsed at work. We rushed to the hospital. A doctor met us in the hallway. "She has a heart condition," he said. "Likely hereditary. She'll need treatment and long-term care." Joy, our laughter, our spark, lay pale and wired to machines. When she saw us, she tried to smile. "You are not allowed to leave us," I said quietly. "That's an order." Joy managed a weak chuckle. "Yes, Sister Grace." We spent months caring for her, rearranging shifts so she was never alone. Slowly, she improved. Slowly, she came back to us. But she was never quite the same Joy we once knew. Loss changes people. Survival does too. As the years went on, the three of us who remained, Sarah, Joy, and I, learned how to live with grief, fear, and the echo of everything we had survived. But deep down, beneath all the quiet routines and careful days, I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't over. Not for me. Not for the truth Eleanor had pressed into my hands, waiting for the moment I was brave enough to open it. I avoided Eleanor's notebook for years, kept it wrapped in cloth, hid it in a drawer, told myself I'd open it when I felt stronger. But strength never came. I just ran out of excuses. One quiet evening, after Sarah went to bed and Joy fell asleep on the couch, I sat at the kitchen table and placed the notebook in front of me. My hands were shaking. "All right," I whispered, "time to stop hiding." When I opened it, the first page hit me like a punch. Eleanor's handwriting, sharp, calm, unflinching, sat at the top. If someone is reading this, it means fear has gone on long enough. I had to close my eyes. Page after page, she recorded everything. Dates, patterns, the moments we pretended to forget so we wouldn't fall apart. Father Michael's visits, his questions, the times he followed Joy, the way Sarah froze whenever she heard his boots on the stone floor. She even wrote about the bishop, the dismissal, every lie told in God's name, every truth we buried to survive. Halfway through, Joy wandered in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Grace, why are you sitting in the dark?" I slid the notebook toward her. "I'm reading it. All of it." She looked down at the open pages and let out a long, trembling breath. "I've tried to forget," she whispered. "I know," I said. But forgetting didn't save us. Joy pulled out a chair and sat beside me. Read it to me. So I did. Slowly, carefully. Sometimes stopping because the words hurt, sometimes stopping because she was crying too hard to see. At one point she murmured, "She wrote this because she trusted you." I nodded. "And she asked me to tell the truth someday." Not long after, Sarah appeared in the doorway, worried by the silence. "Are you two all right?" Joy handed her the notebook. Sarah stared at it like it was something alive. I can't read this." "You don't have to," I said softly. "But it's time we stopped pretending it never happened." For the first time in years, the three of us sat together. No running, no avoiding, no lies told for survival. Just the truth, sitting on the table between us like a wound we finally dared to look at. I closed the notebook gently. "Eleanor wanted this truth to live," I whispered. "And one day, it will." But none of us knew the truth was already moving, already waking up, already making its way back to us. I did not plan to return to Havenwood, not after everything that happened there. But life has a strange way of pulling you back to the places you swore you'd never see again. It started one afternoon when Joy came into the kitchen, holding a church bulletin shed picked up at the grocery store. "Grace, look at this," she said. On the front page was a photo of a young priest. Under it, "Welcome, Father Andrew, our new parish leader in Havenwood." Joy swallowed hard, then added, "It says he's replacing Father Michael after a transfer." Like nothing ever happened, Sarah leaned over her shoulder. "A new priest? What happened to—" She couldn't finish his name. None of us could. I stared at the picture. Something about the timing felt like a signal, a shift, an opening we had never dared hope for. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table with Eleanor's notebook in front of me. Joy walked in quietly. "You're thinking about going back," she said. I nodded. "Someone has to tell the truth. And maybe someone there will finally listen." From the hallway, Sarah whispered, "Grace, it's dangerous." "I know," I said, "but running hasn't stopped anything." The next morning, I packed a small bag. No disguises this time. Age had done its own kind of hiding for me. Gray hair, softer face, a new kind of invisibility. Joy hugged me tightly. "If anything feels wrong, come home." Sarah held my hands. "Don't let him take more from us." I promised them both I would be careful. The bus ride to Havenwood felt unreal. Familiar roads, familiar trees, a familiar silence settling over my chest like an old bruise. When I stepped off at the town square, the air felt heavier, like the past had been waiting exactly where I left it. The church doors were open. I walked inside, my footsteps echoing across the empty sanctuary. A young priest turned from the altar. "Welcome," he said warmly. "I'm Father Andrew. How can I help you?" For a moment, my voice refused to come. Then I lifted Eleanor's notebook. "I have a story you need to hear," I said. "It's long, it's painful, and it's the truth." He gestured for me to sit. Then listen. Something in his voice. Steady, sincere, unguarded. Told me this time might be different. For the first time in 28 years, I felt the faintest pulse of hope. Not safety, not victory. Just the sense of a door unlocking, and somewhere in that town, someone had already noticed I'd come back. Father Andrew listened to my entire story without interrupting once. Not when my voice cracked. Not when I had to stop and breathe. Not even when I slid Eleanor's notebook toward him and watched the realization settle across his face. Not just how much had been ignored, but how deliberately. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said, "Grace, I believe you." I hadn't expected that. I had braced myself for doubt, for excuses, for another gentle command to let it go. Instead, he said, "Will you let me take this to the diocese? If you think they'll listen." "They have to," he murmured. "Though, some won't want this stirred up." It was the first hint of resistance. Small, but real. A secretary at the chancery frowned at my ID. Grace Miller? We don't have records matching that name from Havenwood. My throat tightened. Father Andrew stepped in quickly. She's here to speak with Bishop Alvarez. That's all you need to know. The secretary hesitated, then let us through. Bishop Alvarez, young, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for pulling old secrets into daylight, read the notebook in complete silence. Page after page. Every date, every bruise between the lines. When he finally closed it, he pressed his palms together and said, "Grace, on behalf of the church, I am deeply sorry. We protected the institution, not the women. We failed you." Hearing someone finally name it made my eyes sting. He continued, "We will investigate. We will interview every woman from that era, and we will not shield him." "I tried to tell someone back then," I whispered. He bowed his head, "And they chose not to hear you." The investigation did move fast, but this time I saw it with my own eyes. Folders stacked on desks, phone calls made behind half-closed doors, old records pulled from storage. A list of names, women from different cities, growing longer each day. One night, I called Joy and Sarah. Joy didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then her voice cracked. "Finally," Sarah whispered. "So someone believes us now?" "Yes," I said. "Someone finally does." More women came forward, some from our convent, some from later parishes. Their stories echoed ours in ways that made my stomach twist. Then, one afternoon, Father Andrew knocked on my door. "They're holding a gathering at the parish hall," he said. "A public acknowledgement. They want you there." My chest tightened. What if I can't face this? He offered a small, steady smile. "You already faced the hardest part." When I walked into the hall, people rose to their feet, not to applaud, but out of solemn respect. Some had tears, some had shame, some simply listened, finally listening. The bishop stepped to the microphone and read a statement condemning Father Michael and the church's failure to stop him. Then he said, "Grace Miller is here today. Because she spoke, others found courage." I didn't want applause. I didn't want attention. I only wanted the truth to breathe, nothing more. Standing there, surrounded by faces I once feared would judge me, I understood something simple. The monster was exposed, and this time, he had nowhere left to hide. But exposure doesn't always mean safety. Not yet. Justice did not arrive suddenly. It came slowly, piece by piece, like something rebuilding itself after years of damage. But it did come. A month after the public gathering, Father Andrew visited me again. "He has been removed," he said softly. "Stripped of every title, every privilege. Hes in a care facility now. No collar, no parish, no access, no one left to intimidate." I didn't feel joy, not triumph, just release, like a weight that had lived inside my ribs finally loosened. A week later, Joy and Sarah traveled with me to the facility, not to see him, but to see the end of the story with our own eyes. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and mashed potatoes. A nurse lowered her voice. "He doesn't receive visitors." "Good," Joy muttered. We stood there together, hands linked, like the cellar, like the storm, like the night we ran. I whispered, "He cannot touch anyone again." Sarah nodded. "And he cannot touch us." Something shifted inside me then. Not happiness, not closure, just space. Space I had never been allowed to have. Father Andrew encouraged me to speak publicly when I felt ready. "Your story can help others," he said. "I'm not sure anyone wants to hear it," I admitted. He smiled softly. "You'd be surprised." Years passed. Slowly, our lives grew into shapes we never imagined. Joy found strength again and began volunteering at a community center. Sarah cared for elderly women, tenderly, patiently, as if she were mending pieces of her own past. And I sat with survivors. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they couldn't. Sometimes the bravest thing they did was simply sit down. Word spread, quietly at first. With the parish support, the Street Mary of Peace Center was born. Not fancy, not loud, just a door that stayed open. Someone once asked me, Grace, how many women have come through these doors? I answered. In the decades since, more than 3,000. Sometimes, late at night, I sit by the window and think about the 4 women who began this journey with me: Martha, Eleanor, Joy, and Sarah. I think about the convent, the storm, the escape, the losses, the courage, the notebook, the truth that almost died with us. And I understand something simple. We did not survive to stay silent. We survived so others could speak. After 28 years of running, hiding, grieving, and fighting, I finally found peace. And I believe, wherever they are, the women we lost have found it too.